Do you want to learn how to navigate eating disorder recovery as an autistic person? Well, then you are definitely going to want to listen to my free audio training, 3 Steps to Recovery from an Eating Disorder as an Autistic Person. In this training, I guide you through 3 simple steps to give you the clarity and confidence you need to use your autistic traits to your advantage in eating disorder recovery. It's like having a private coaching session with me on demand. Whether you believe being autistic is making recovery feel impossible, or confused about what's your eating disorder and what's your autism, or are just feeling stuck, this audio training is the resource for you. And the best part is, it's free $99. That's right, this 45-minute audio training is completely free. So you literally have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Listen now at livelabelfree.com/free-audio training. What was that again? That was livelabelfree.com/free-audio training. Okay, now can we get back to the episode? Absolutely.
Gotta put one foot in front of the other, and you'll be around the corner soon.
Welcome to the Live Label Free podcast, where we talk about autism, ADHD, eating disorders, existentialism, and everything in between. I'm your host, Livia. Now let's get into it. I want to talk about something that I feel isn't discussed enough, or rather at all, in the context of eating disorder recovery. And I believe this is especially relevant for autistic and ADHD people and neurodivergent people in general, because neurotypical people don't appear to think this way. But the thing is that many of us neurodivergent folks are constantly curious. We are constantly asking deep, existential questions. We wonder, what's the purpose of life? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? How do I know I'm not doing everything wrong? It's a very philosophical way of thinking, and I've talked about this before, but the eating disorder then becomes a way to delude ourselves into thinking we have found our purpose. The existential angst of choosing the quote-unquote wrong path becomes overwhelming, and the eating disorder offers a false sense of control and certainty. It convinces us we are on the quote-unquote right path as long as we adhere to its rules and beliefs. And for many neurodivergent people who were traumatized as children simply for being different, this belief system of the eating disorder becomes incredibly appealing. Being what I like to call a neurodivergent alien in a neurotypical world is extremely isolating. Not only that, but it is traumatic for your nervous system that perceives danger, because biologically, being different can make you vulnerable to judgment, ridicule, and rejection, which many of us neurodivergent people experience regularly. That's why we develop coping mechanisms like eating disorders, which trap us in our own little snow globes, shielding us from the outside world. Something that held me back from recovering from my eating disorder for so long was the fear that I wouldn't be able to handle the responsibilities of being healthy. And I did do an entire podcast episode on this, specifically dedicated to this topic, so be sure to go back and find the episode on fear of growing up and fear of being healthy as an autistic person if you're interested in learning more about that. But I believe that this is kind of where the misconception about eating disorder recovery comes in. There's this presentation on social media and in many books and probably even other podcasts that when you are recovered from an eating disorder, your life is magically wonderful and amazing and perfect, and oh my gosh, it just couldn't be better. I'll admit I've contributed to this portrayal at times, but I've also tried to counteract it by opening up about my struggles. In fact, I started a weekly email series where I reflect on what's happening in my life, including my vulnerable moments. I choose not to post these updates on social media because it's too public, and honestly, I just don't want to deal with the trolls anymore. And so if you do follow me on social media, you may have noticed I'm barely on there anymore. And that's because, well, what even is this world? I'm choosing to focus my energy in places where I know it's valued, because people who listen to the podcast and people who read my books and people who do coaching with me, they actually email me and message me and they tell me it's valuable. So I know that even as I'm talking right now, I know that you're appreciating this because people have told me they appreciate this. So anyways, if you want to hear more updates about my personal life and what I'm struggling with behind the scenes, be sure to get on my email list at livelabelfree.com/join. So yeah, to be honest, my life with or without an eating disorder involves suffering. I know that might sound extreme and I think very philosophical in a lot of ways, because it also depends on, of course, what we are defining as suffering. But I think for humans, and a lot of philosophical teachers and writers have stated this, is that the human condition equals suffering. For neurodivergent people, that suffering can often be amplified, especially if we let society dictate how we should live our lives. And of course, all society wants is for you to be a cog in a giant wheel. It just wants you to conform, which us neurodivergent people, we just can't do because we're just not wired that way. So regardless of society's expectations though, suffering is inevitable. And when we have an eating disorder, we try to numb ourselves from that existential suffering. But the eating disorder only brings on a new kind of suffering because, well, it's an eating disorder. The illusion that I feel the internet perpetuates is that recovery from an eating disorder magically frees you from suffering. But as someone who has recovered and has created their own purpose, I've learned that suffering does not go away. And I use that word created very purposefully, no pun intended, because I don't believe we find our purpose. I believe we create it. And obviously there are signs from the universe that help us on that path, but ultimately your purpose is not something hiding under a rock that, oh, look, you just need to uncover it. There it is. I found my purpose. No, your purpose is something you must actively create every single day. Let's pull back the curtain on my life a bit. I wake up every morning feeling the resistance and the fear of failure. What's going to happen if I'm vulnerable? Will someone leave another 1-star review for my book? Will another troll come onto my social media and tell me what an awful, unqualified eating disorder recovery coach I am? I may be laughing now in retrospect because I know that these people are simply projecting their own fears and insecurities onto me. It's still hard. And despite that, or perhaps because of it, I choose to keep creating my purpose. I choose to keep being an artist in a world of cogs. I choose to not conform. Because the people that only care about certifications and diplomas and all the other stuff that, ultimately really doesn't matter, but we're conditioned to believe that matters, these people are, like characters in that painting, The Blind Leading the Blind. They're only judging and shaming and being trolls because they themselves are afraid of creating their art. They themselves are afraid of standing out and being different. Because when you are fully tapped into your purpose and letting your innate wisdom guide you, and you are creating your art, and you are being different, and you are contributing to this world, you don't have time for any of that shit. I mean, I genuinely do not understand the people that leave negative comments and go and just say mean stuff for no reason. I'm like, I don't even have time for that. How do you have the time for that? Do you literally have nothing better to do with your time? But ultimately, what they're actually doing is they're ignoring what really matters. And these are the things that aren't things at all. I mean, relationship, a sense of fulfillment, excitement, freedom, anything truly important in life cannot be made tangible. And again, this is, I think, why the trolls exist and why the negative Nancys exist and why those people exist, that no matter what, no matter how good the book is, they will always leave 1-star review because they don't have enough fulfillment in their own life. So they believe that if they make someone else wrong, they will temporarily make themselves right. But of course, because that's not the way it works, they keep going and they keep going and they keep going, trying to find that satisfaction, but every time they're left empty again, because what they're doing unknowingly, of course, is creating that emptiness. So anyways, this is why I choose to not be like those people, and this is why I choose to trust my inner wisdom, to trust my inner artist. I choose to write, I choose to coach, and I choose to create content like this episode you're listening to right now. This process of creation is an active and daily choice. So when I talk about suffering, I don't mean it in a dark or heavy sense, but rather as a part of my unique human experience. When you recover from an eating disorder then, you're not suddenly set free from the suffering, because I have new things that plague me now. They're constant thoughts, so many ideas about all the books I want to write and all the content I want to create, and just not enough hours in the day. My brain constantly feels like it's bouncing off the walls, and that too is a form of suffering. And I'm actually reminded right now of what a client said to me recently, and that is that the absence of glucose in her brain due to restriction during her eating disorder was actually a really effective strategy to numb herself from her brain going balls to the walls. Now, I'm obviously not trying to sell you on an eating disorder here, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. The eating disorder serves a purpose, and when we can acknowledge that without judgment, without saying, oh my gosh, an eating disorder is such a horrible thing and it's caused by diet culture and we need to fight it off like it's some poisonous venom. No, when we can acknowledge, like, wow, it's actually serving a purpose and there's a reason this person is holding on to that story, well, that opens the doors to curiosity, which in turn allows us to align our actions with our authentic and healthy values. What if I told you eating disorders weren't disorders at all? What if we started seeing them as a spectrum of adaptive eating behaviors? Behaviors that are an attempted way to find safety in an unpredictable and uncontrollable world. If you are neurodivergent or care for someone who is and are desperate for a neurodiversity-affirming approach to eating disorder recovery, you're not going to want to miss my upcoming group coaching program, the Autistically ED-Free Academy. Unlike most treatment methods that destroy trust, increase anxiety, and leave trauma in their wake, the Autistically ED-Free Academy teaches you how to support yourself or a loved one through the recovery process with compassion and respect for neurodivergent needs. You'll learn to view eating disorders in a non-pathological way, which I believe opens the doors to inviting curiosity to the neurodivergent roots. If this sounds like something you'd be interested in, be sure to get on the program waitlist at livelabelfree.com/group. I can't wait to share more info with you soon, and now let's get back to today's episode. Even though I suffer in many new ways now, there's a significant difference between the suffering of having an eating disorder and the suffering of being recovered, or rather just being a healthy human being. Because I don't believe in the concept of being in recovery. I talk about this in my memoir Rainbow Girl, as well as How to Beat Extreme Hunger, and that's this idea that being quote-unquote in recovery, and yes, even being all in recovery, is just another identity that keeps you trapped. And maybe this external identity keeps you even more trapped than the eating disorder itself. And yes, I'm actually going to mention another book right now, and I actually talk about this concept of, being stuck in eating disorder recovery, and that this is a story that you tell yourself, and as long as you choose to be a victim of that story, you will stay stuck. And yeah, like I said, I talk about this a lot more in my upcoming book, How to Get Out of Quasi-Recovery. But the thing about suffering after an eating disorder, after any limitation for that matter, is that when you create your purpose and when you choose to align your actions with your values rather than being a victim to fear, you create a life that's worth suffering for. And I think ultimately, in a lot of ways, that is parallel to any purpose that you choose to create, is that you are creating something worth suffering for. The human condition naturally involves suffering. Those two things are part and parcel. So the key is to stop trying and failing to end the suffering, but rather to focus on creating something meaningful, because then the suffering itself takes on a completely different quality. An eating disorder offers a false sense of purpose. It tricks you into thinking you're suffering for something important, whether it's control, a specific weight, or to numb sensory overwhelm. But the reality is that you're suffering just to create more suffering. The numbing isn't real, and the control. How much control do you truly have if the food and exercise is controlling your life? Like I said, it's all an illusion. You trick yourself into believing that as long as you do the eating disorder right, you can protect yourself from being wrong in the world. But again, you're not protecting yourself from anything. For what are you truly protecting if you're destructing the very entity that makes your existence possible? I'll leave that up to you to answer because I truly believe we all possess the answers within ourselves, and this path we call life is about asking ourselves the questions that allow us to discover those answers. If you want more support on your journey, be sure to grab a copy of any of my books at livelabelfreebooks.com. And if you are curious about when my book, How to Get Out of Quasi-Recovery, is coming out, be sure to sign up for my email newsletter, livelabelfree.com/join, where I send you weekly free value and free content and updates and just way more than I could ever share on social media, because social media is all a made-up lie highlight reel anyways. Alright, I'll talk to you in the next episode, my friend. Bye-bye for now.
Baby, just one foot in front of the other.